Nu ska vi välkomna upp på scen Maya Lauridsen Faerch som är chefskonsult på Lendager Group. Ni såg ju ett av deras projekt, föreläsningen nyss. Det ska handla om cirkulär ekonomi, det vill säga ett modernt ord för kretslopp. Eller om man ska vara lite mer slagordsmässig, när vi börjar återanvända kan vad som helst hända. Ja, ni hör ju, det är bäst att någon som vet vad de talar om får ta över. Varsågod, välkommen Maya Lauridsen Faerch.
Hello, and thank you. Wow, what an inspiring morning. I'm completely psyched. So, I love entering this room, and the first thing I'm told before I enter is, please stay within the carpet, because that's just practical, easier, and poor cameraman. So the first thing I have to do is go out, because I guess that's why people booked me today. So this morning we've talked about the big why. Why do we have to think different? And what is the role of architects in doing so? And I guess my purpose today is talk a little bit more about how. How can we then do things a little differently? And to do so, I want to take you on a little journey, because I want to, for all of you to imagine a world without resource scarcity, a world where our behaviors does not have a negative impact on the climate, and a world where waste does not exist. We had a woman this morning saying that sometimes the world could feel hopeless, but I really think that the strength of architects is creativity and imagination. And I really think that it is your and our responsibility to make this world and this crisis not a waste, but see it as an opportunity. And this is the purpose of Lendager Group, where I'm from. So my name is Maya Faerch, I'm chief consultant in Lendager, and basically we started as a fairly typical architectural company wanting to build and draw sustainable buildings. Fastly we figured out one thing is drawing it, there's some challenges there, but fairly easy. Another thing is actually executing it. And I'm sure that you've all sit in these positions where you have these amazing ideas and it's full of potential, but how do we make this actually real? When we started in 2008, sustainable building materials was not really a thing. It was really hard to source, and especially within an economic frame as we all work in. So we started Lendager Up. That's an upcycling company producing and delivering upcycled materials based on waste. And then when we had pretty good success with that, we started Lendager TCW, The Circular Way, where I'm from, advising others in how to do so. And everything we do is because we believe that we are currently entering into a new world. We're entering into a world where our basic periodic table, I know you hope that everyone remembers this from school, the elements are slowly disappearing. So this is how our future, basically, this is how it looks. It is slowly changing what kind of elements we can attract from the earth. If I was here to tell you that the world is going under and everything is sad, then I would have stopped here. But I truly do believe that the circular economy is here because this is how we're going to change how we behave. So here you see that even though some of our basic elements are disappearing from the ground, it doesn't mean that they're gone. It just means they're in the waste that we have today. So if we find a solution to really utilize the waste that we have, then we can come back to normal. So it's just about changing how we behave. Population is growing. I know that this is a debate, it's not a fact, but it is a fact that it's growing in cities at least. Human well-being is growing. The economics, I know that the stock market is not too good today or yesterday, and I know globally, but also in Sweden. But economic growth is a fact, even though we've debated it a lot the past hour. We just have to figure out how do we decouple CO2 and decouple virgin material extraction from this kind of growth. This is our new normal. We have to design a world of tomorrow with the waste of today, while working towards designing a world completely without waste. And this is, I would say, the primary, should be the primary purpose of all architects. So, from problem to solutions. If I were to ask you, if you could change one thing about your body, what would it be? Would you lose 2 kilos? Maybe, it's so annoying to wear glasses. Maybe the hair is falling off. I think we all have these. I have this strange issue with long toes. Now I have everyone thinking about my long toes. If I ask my 4-year-old daughter in kindergarten, what is her response? She says she wants to fly. Her friend says she wants to be a unicorn. So how is it that we're sometimes just forced in within this carpet, and sometimes we have to go out here and say, what if I could do or be anything? What if I could completely change? Then those 2 kilos, they probably won't make you much more happy. But being able to fly, I think so. So this is my point of the why and the how. We need to be more creative. So for the next 20 minutes, I'll talk you through 5 global questions, global issues, and then 5 local solutions. My first why. Why don't we focus more on innovating materials when 40 to 50% of building lifetime CO2 originates from the construction choices? I won't go too much into details with this because the previous speaker spent a lot of time talking about this, and I couldn't agree more. We need to stop thinking so much about concrete, about steel, and start thinking much more in natural resources. And if we could use natural resources based on recycled materials, then even better. This is a specific solution where we're working on a project called TR3, Træ, wood, based in Aarhus in Denmark, the second biggest city, where we say we have to build a new office. It's 13,000 square meters, and the developer comes and they ask for a construction steel glass building, because that's how offices look today. And we start saying we have to change this. So based on the 4 Ps, looking at purpose, people, planet, profit, how is it that we can completely rethink the material choices of this building, making it, no need to say, more attractive for companies today. So we build in wood as a construction, and basically, I don't want to talk too much about this today because in Sweden you're much better at this than we are in Denmark. But wooden construction, it is the way to go. We're stretching it a little bit further and saying, how can we build in recycled wooden construction? And then using windmills on the facades, because currently, even though the windmill industry is one of our best industries, we are taking down big windmill farms and putting them to waste because no one knows how to use it. We're saying, why don't we look at buildings as resource banks? Buildings take up so much virgin materials, 40% of our virgin materials globally. Why don't we just use buildings as resource banks and put the waste materials that we don't know where to put else into buildings? Of course, making sure that they're healthy at the same time. Another point is the social part. So this building is to be placed in a place where there's a lot of homeless people today. And the developer said, we can't build an office where there's a lot of homeless people. And we said, maybe that's exactly the value that you're going to give your renters. So we're trying to make a very open ground floor where we're really being inclusive in terms of who is there today and who will be there tomorrow. My second why. Why do we reuse less than 10% of the 2.12 billion tons of waste we dump globally every year? That's crazy. one local solution is we're currently working on the Danish Olympic Pavilion for the Olympic Games in Japan 2020. And when we were asked to do so, it's the Olympics Games and waste go very well together. So we all know the stories about these huge Olympic cities built, constructed, used for a couple of weeks, and then left behind. So how can we help such an event avoid waste? So we said, okay, maybe we can take some plastic waste and local wood from Fukushima. We can design a chair. We can build a pavilion with chairs. Then we can disassemble it, and then we end up with chairs. So this is actually a project that will be realized this year. We're done drawing. We're done with the concepts. Now we're in production phase of 2,500 chairs. If you know anyone in Japan or the area around that needs 2,500 chairs, we are currently looking for buyers or receivers. So this is the chair. As you see, it's designed so that it creates, when we put them on top, a wall. And this is exactly what we do. So one thing is taking waste and building it into the buildings today. Another thing is really thinking about design for disassemble. So this is how it ends up looking like. And basically everyone loves it. It's amazing. Who wouldn't want to be in a building based on 2,500 chairs? It's amazing. And I'll say the chairs are really pretty good sitting in. We've had a couple of choices. So, third why. Why do we demolish our buildings and throw away valuable resources? So today, more and more developers and contractors are starting to think about it, but basically, we get a new project, we buy a piece of land. If there's a building there, we demolish it if we may, if the municipality allows us to, and then we build new. We say we have to start mapping the resources there. This is a case from Varvstaden in Malmö, where we mapped resources in an old industry area, and where we said, if you demolish these materials, we will never produce something like it again. It doesn't only have CO2 value because there's so much CO2 embedded in it. It also has a lot of aesthetic and identity value. So let's take and map these materials and make it into these new amazing buildings. Another project where we mapped resources is Lille Akkerbyen suburb in Oslo, where it's a whole suburb that they need to demolish or transform from a business park into households, buildings. So we said, okay, how can we make them not want to demolish this? Because it's crazy. Most of the buildings were built in the 2000s and up. So we said, what kind of materials are there? And how much is there? Good start to understand what is it actually we have to work on. Then we said, how much CO2 is embedded in the materials? With crazy amounts, because these buildings are so new, they are only based on glass, concrete, and steel. So really huge potentials. We present this to the developer and say, yeah, we definitely need to do something about this, but you know, the economics, it's not possible. It will be too costly. How are we going to do this? We can't. And then we say, yes, you can. Because one thing is looking at the embedded CO2. There's also something about looking at the embedded economics in these buildings. So then we took all of their expenses for building the buildings and saying, so this is actually your risk margin. You have 1.4 billion Norwegian kroner that can cover all of the risk that you're going to go through in transforming the buildings and circulating the materials from the buildings. And then suddenly, he was actually listening. Because this is what you can spend, what they could spend on advisory, on innovation, on technical support, on building the business model, etc. And we don't look at this today. We start looking at the embedded CO2, we don't look at the embedded financials. We have to. Because if we don't talk economics, people won't change their investments. So this really changed. And then we ended up making a big resource mapping that not only had these facts, but also helped, talking about the collaboration theme of today, also helped everybody across the value chain with something they could talk about. So it's not flying goals, we're developing something crazy, nobody has seen it before, and the contractors say, I don't want to be there. Instead, we're saying, okay, how is it actually we take this down to basics and make it a tool for collaboration? And that really worked. Another why. Why do we think that new things have to be made of virgin materials? It's like sometimes we think that if we do recycling, it's going to end up looking like the 60s. We've been there, it wasn't really scalable, let's not go there. I say that this has to be the architect's problem and opportunity. We can create beautiful new things based on waste. These are some of our examples. We work with concrete, with wood, with bricks, with kitchens, with facades, where we basically take waste materials from buildings or from industry players, and then we develop it into building materials that at least we think that it's beautiful, and that nobody really can see that this was actually waste. We take wood, we take concrete, we take windows, we look at it, at the potentials instead of looking at the waste, and then we develop it into new products. The wood here is from the metro line, where you have to use a lot of wood to transport very heavy concrete elements. We've made that into facade elements. We took concrete, actually also from building the metro line in Copenhagen, crushed it down and used it as aggregate for new concrete. And windows, where we took a 2-layer glazing, put them into a double frame. We end up having 4 layers instead of 3. And then suddenly they can perform to a 2020 window. So where everyone said they can't perform, we just said we just have to, I'm sorry, cameraman again, step out of the carpet and think differently. Another part is wood. So we look at 3 different sources of waste. We look at waste from industry. We look at waste from demolishing buildings and renovation of buildings, transformation. And then we look at waste from construction sites where new materials are just never used. Because you see, one thing is we have to find a solution for waste from the demolitions, because that's where most waste comes from. But there's so much very easy waste to be used. That's materials never been used before. So these walls where you see here is offcuts from Dinesen. Dinesen is a Danish player, really upscale wooden products. And they have so much waste because they only sell the best of the best. So everything that they do not sell is still better than benchmark quality in the market. So how can we just take that waste, it's not waste, it's never been used before, and implement it into buildings, actually ending up delivering a better product than what else would have been implemented into these buildings. Bricks, where we, instead of crushing it down, we cut it up, we make it into sandwich elements so that the contractor can also relate to how he's going to build with it, and then we make beautiful new facades with it. So really just looking at, this is a project from Malmö, we built with Skanska, where we made acoustic panels out of 100% recycled wood, and and tiles, concrete tiles, based on 45% wood, concrete recycled. So really looking at how can we just change the design, make a design so that because we know that the lengths of the wood that we can source is different, we just have to make the design so that it can inherit it. My last and big why, and it's interesting how this morning we've talked so much about financials. I'll continue that. Why do we think that sustainability is always more expensive than conventional construction? Why? because people want us to believe it is, and because we don't know exactly how to. So building on the previous presentation on growth, basically, if you look at this, the first one is the linear economy. It's basics, how is the financials divided? It's based on Danish numbers. But basically, normally we spend 45% on buying materials, 25% on salary, and 30% on the rest. In the circular economy, the 100% doesn't change. Right now, it's hard to make it cheaper. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. But it's basically pretty much benchmarking. What does change is how we spend our money. So we spend less money on materials because it's waste. And we spend much more money on the processing, on the salaries. And this is where I think that we can speak to the growth mind, and because these processes do demand a lot, where we had the other case from stone to concrete, and why we're not just using the stone. Here, we actually do need a lot of processing to go through the different materials, creating activities that are inherent economics, but in a different way, not spending money on resources. And it really does make sense. How do we do it? I think so many times when we do innovations, and we do a lot of innovations, people tend to just focus on the technical part. How can we do this? Can it be done? I'm not saying that the technical part is not important. I'm just saying that we need to start somewhere else. We always start with the market. What are they willing to pay? What is the demand? What is the need? And what is the price? And then we have a frame for innovation. Then we know, okay, when we have to circulate a steel facade plate, can we cut it out, or is there no financials to do so? Then we can start designing, both in terms of designing the aesthetics, but also designing the technical part of it. And so we have a frame. That's the technical. Then the implementation. It's so hard to fight what we have to do. You cannot produce a circular product without being completely competitive in terms of price and performance. And we need to perform. And all of our products need to perform 20% better than benchmark, because otherwise people won't buy it. So we really need to understand, how do we implement this in an existing building? And then the last part about collaboration. Because right now, the money part is based on very few players, and we really need to start understanding that when we circulate materials, we involve different people in different phases, and we need to understand that we cannot succeed without collaboration. And for me, the architect has not been so much involved in the actual realization before. We need to today, because otherwise the contractor will just say it's too risky and it's too difficult. When we have the idea, we need to be there to also help them realize these ideas, because it's changing. So, we are creating value when we are making circular constructions or sustainable constructions. We're creating value on CO2, we're creating value on not using waste, and we're creating value on new aesthetics, but also job creation and the basic economics. So really, we need to see across value parameters to really understand what it is we are buying into. And of course, we need to do it across the SDGs. And I think that these, even though basically they're embedded in everything that I talked to you about earlier, but just showing them to developers, to contractors, it really, really helps the process, because everyone wants to be part of these colors. So, back to the unicorn. I think my most important point is just to say, it doesn't, those 2 kilos, or that small optimization, of course it always helps, but it doesn't really make anything a lot better. We need to strive for the unicorn. And we cannot predict the future, but I do believe that together we can invent it. Thank you.